Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady, and I am back with my co-host, JC, and our very special guest, Ari Gunsberg, known as Ari Guns to his friends. How you doing, Ari?
Doing awesome. Thanks so much for having me again.
Hey, I want to continue this conversation because I could talk about this forever. It goes into every aspect of life, not just the workplace life, but that is what our listeners are here for. But if you don't feel like you belong in any type of relationship, then you're left scratching your head, and you're certainly not going to be engaged or motivated to do something to make that relationship, productive. So I do want to talk a little bit about, the state of employee engagement in today's workforce, why people call you every day, all day about, doing outdoor activities and bringing nature into their lives, and then also motivational speaking. And, what are the consequences of us ignoring this? Really, let's just get down to it. What are the consequences as a human being of ignoring somebody else's sense of belonging or sense of not belonging? How do you get people to listen to you?
We're always living in this weird balance of, belonging too much, and that's not really too much, but like a full sense of belonging and like not belonging at all, right? Like we go to a new event where we don't know anybody and we are completely put out, so many of us, because there's so many people out there that are afraid to introduce themselves, that are afraid to talk to people. And then when you bring that into more of a work setting, right? So HR is bringing people in, and one of HR's number one ways that they can essentially help, I guess, with engagement and retention is trying to help that person fit in as quickly as possible, right? In a large corporation, there's going to be these existing cliques and existing friendships and existing, workplace, I'm going to say, I don't want to say relationships, but workplace nuances that are constantly happening. And so HR needs to bring people in and help them fit in and feel like they're a part of the group as quickly as possible. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can help people feel like they belong with the other people on their team, right? And people are coming from all different backgrounds and all different areas. And so the more that we can put them into a space where they're like, oh, this is my place, right? As opposed to, 5 weeks in, they might be thinking, well, do I really belong here? Like, is this really the place that I should be working? Like, did I do the right thing by taking this job? Or maybe I didn't, so they're not going to be engaged if they're still having those second guesses about their own decision. And people, let's face it, people can be having those second guesses for the first 2 to 5 years potentially, right? So as HR professionals, it's this is part of what I do is I'm trying to help people feel like they are more connected to each other, right? When we're utilizing the 5 keys, they are interpersonal and also I don't know if I'm using the word right, but they're relevant to ourselves, between ourselves and other people, as well as between ourselves alone. And so we do need to feel like we belong within our own skin before we can get anywhere, right? After a bad breakup, right? If you used to read, not that I used to read them, but like they would always talk like, the Cosmos and all these other magazines, right? Oh, a bad breakup, here's what you do, right? Reconnect to yourself, right? That's like, I don't know how many articles they've written like that. I'm sure that every 3 months they recycle the same article and put it back in there or something, right? But it's like, reconnect to yourself. Why? Because when you're in that deep relationship, you forget necessarily what creates the most power within yourself. So we do need to definitely belong within ourselves before we can get anywhere within a community. But then we need to integrate people into the community. And as HR professionals, anything we can do to help people is good. As people, when we see somebody new to the group, anything we can do to help bring them into the fold, to help them feel like they belong more is very important. I was in a school where the head of school used to, every week probably, he was like, when somebody new comes in, do you go and ask them their name? Do you ask them how they are, where they're from? Like, do you introduce yourself, or do you kind of like allow them to just wander around and have no idea who they are, where they are, anything like that, right? We have to put forth effort. And by the way, if you're new and you're like myself and you recognize that everybody's new at some point and that we all can do a little something, so you can always go and introduce yourself, right? I'm trying to explain to my kids now that, you know, in a new situation, just go introduce yourself. And people are so scared to introduce themselves for some reason. I think it's part of this, you know, am I enough and will I be loved type thing. But you're always allowed to introduce yourself. Hey, my name is Ari. I'm from, you know, here. This is where I live, whatever. This is what I do. Because most of the people in that room are just as scared as you are, if not more scared.
Yeah,
right?
I think you hit it right.
Especially at new events.
Right on the head. You really did, because it's not, and you're not always in the mood to introduce yourself, or based on your personality style, you may not be a warm, touchy person like myself, but you know, I realize it's something in life that I have to introduce myself to people. And then I sometimes just see people. I remember one time, geez, it was like 20 years ago. I walked into an HR event and there was a young person standing there by themselves. I didn't really know a lot of people there. And I was like, I could see this person just looking at their feet. And I was like, walked right up to them, and still friends with that person today, and was able to bring them into the fold of the few people that I did know. What I wanted to really pause real quick. And then you mentioned your 5 keys, that I believe you talk about, your 5 keys to greatness. But before we get into that, I wanted to really stop and define to our listeners what employee engagement is. So employee engagement isn't just that people feel that they belong. Employee engagement isn't just that people are happy, because you could be really unproductive and a very happy employee. It also doesn't mean that they're just, you know, satisfied, but it really means that they're committed to whatever it is they're doing, committed to their team, committed to their departments, committed to their organization. And so that commitment is huge. For some people, a paycheck and great benefits might bring commitment. For other people, they may say, that's not as important to me. My friendships are. So it makes it a lot more challenging to make sure everybody is satisfied, happy, productive, committed. They feel belonging, because every human wants something different. And that is where the challenge lies. Go ahead, JC.
Interestingly, employees who are engaged and have a sense of belonging contribute to organic growth within our organization by improving work relationships, which ultimately results in a 10% increase in public satisfaction of employer services. And this can result in a 20% increase in sales and a 21% increase in profitability for an organization across the board. It all goes back to being engaged and belonging.
There's huge numbers there. A 20% increase in sales, 21% increase in profitability.
That's right.
Just
when you
huge.
used to sell $1, you now sell 20.
Right.
40% of the time, it's 100% right.
You know, and it's one of those things, like, I'm not doing math right now, gentlemen, not doing math, but I like to stress and make sure people remember, HR folks that are listening, or managers who have the HR hat on, in lieu of having an HR department, is if you're going to be asking your CFO or your COO or your CEO for more money, really, really show them why. I'm not just asking for a recognition program or a new HRIS system or whatever it might be because I think it's really cool for our employees, but because it is going to be connected to the bottom line. And so, you know, we have these executives in there for a reason, and it's usually to protect our revenue and our profitability. But once they may not know of this connection between, you know, not just being nice to employees, but truly, truly engaging them and making them feel safe and secure and belonging in the workplace. And so super important to be sharing those statistics. What I also wanted to talk about a little bit before we jump into episode 3 and discuss those 5 keys to greatness is the stress of not being engaged, not being satisfied, not being having a sense of belonging, literally the stress on employees, and that can really, really cost you a lot of money with healthcare. So it's super important for the organizations that are listening today. to make sure that you are realizing also your health insurance companies, if you have health insurance. I know not everybody has health insurance, but if you do have health insurance, to make sure that you are, talking to your broker and say, hey, we've made some changes in our engagement strategies. What has changed in our health claims? It's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of other things about that. Before we head out to our session 3, Ari, you have something else you want to add about introducing yourself?
Yeah, I thought, just as I finished talking, I thought of a quick tip. If you ever are in a situation where it's like a bunch of new people all over the place and you want to introduce yourself, but you feel a little bit too shy, one quick trick. Instead of going around and introducing yourself to people, find somebody else who looks even about the same lost as you or more lost than you and say, hey, can I introduce you to some people? And bring them around and say, hey, this is John. John, meet, what was your name again? And just walk around and introduce them to people. You won't know them. They won't know them. Nobody cares. Everybody wants to introduce themselves to people because everybody wants to feel like they belong. And so when you're walking around, it's so much easier to do that. It's to step out of your zone a little bit when you're doing that. And you just, that's one little trick. So you don't have to kind of put yourself on the spot. And then you can be like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm Ari also. And then people will just start talking. You don't have to worry about it so much. You get 2 or 3 people into a little circle. They'll find common ground. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's a great tip. My final tip for that is I always just ask people, so where are you from? Did you grow up here or did you move from somewhere else? Now, I used to say that because I live in Florida and Ari, you live in Florida as well, because, Florida used to be a very transient community, but the whole world is now. Especially with remote working. So people are moving all over the world. And so a great conversation for most communities is, did you grow up here? Where are you from? And then boom, you have this whole conversation that now you feel like you have something in common with the person just because you're excited to talk about, traveling or not traveling, and then how the community has changed if you've never moved from one place to another. With that said, thanks, everybody, for joining us on episode 205 in the series of boosting employee engagement and connection. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the keys to greatness when you are looking for a sense of belonging or providing it to someone else. We'll be right back.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.